Yeah, it's about time I did this video. Fun fact, and I said this on Twitter when it first happened. I actually recorded this video months and months and months ago. But then when I finally sat down to edit it, I realized that I had the same show on here more than once and didn't have a show that is in my top 10. It had been completely deleted off the dock for whatever reason. Anyway, this is my top 20 Western animated shows as a complimentary piece to the top 30 anime that I did almost 2 years ago now, actually. Like, that's how long I've been just kind of sitting on this. And I settled on top 20 instead of top 30 because a lot of my memories are shaky on a lot of the stuff that makes the bottom third of the list. I will read off the 30 through 21 here real quick, though. Number 30, Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Number 29, Arthur. Number 28, Boondocks. Number 27, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which is the best adaptation of any Avengers property, by the way. 26, The Simpsons. See why I'm actually only going into my top 20. The Simpsons, when it was good, was one of the greatest shows of all time, but it hasn't been that good in, 20 years now. Number 25, Code Lyoko. Number 24, Static Shock. Number 23, Scooby-Doo. I just have a soft spot for it. Sue me. 22, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Number 21, Ben 10, which is apparently nowhere near as good as I remember it being. I recently watched Low Art's review series on Ben 10, and it made me kind of question its placement on this list. But again, 30 through 21 doesn't really matter. What matters for this video is what's in the title, which is the top 20. Without further ado, number 20 is The Amazing World of Gumball. This show is way better than it has any right to be. I wrote this off immediately from the first time I saw screenshots of it back in 2010, 2011. It started 2011, but I'm pretty sure I was aware of it before it came out. But then my little sister got hooked on it a couple years ago, probably about 8 years ago now. She got hooked on it. And I would watch it with her. And this is the funniest kid show of the past 20 years. This is just a riot from top to bottom. It is just so clever and so, Animaniacs-y? We'll get to that later. There's this kind of pseudo-adult edge that has a lot of stuff that teenagers and adults would get that would kind of fly over the heads of little kids. It's really good about hiding that stuff within the kind of more typical cartoon hijinks. And speaking of striking that good balance, 19 is Powerpuff Girls, a show that I watched. I think the last time I watched it was almost 10 years ago now. So I do remember it quite well. More so than a lot of the shows I mentioned in the first few minutes of this video. So Powerpuff Girls is about 3 superpowered girls who fight crime and the forces of evil and a lot of giant monsters. And it's kind of a parody of superhero, particularly Silver Age superhero stuff, where it's just all wacky hijinks. But it gets pretty raw and dark in a couple episodes, and those episodes do stand out very well. But it's just bright and colorful, and it's just a really good kid show. Number 18 is not a kid show. It is King of the Hill. This is what Simpsons would be like if Simpsons didn't last 15, 20 years past its expiration date. King of the Hill it's about a couple dudes and their families in Texas just living their life in early 2000s America, and it's just the realest show ever. It's really good. It's, again, the problem with talking about a lot of Western animation is that America in particular tends to favor animation for comedy, which is great because animation is perfect for comedy. There's so much comedic value that you do with animation that you can't do in any other medium. Whereas stuff like action and drama and the kind of punchy radio comedy, you can do that in any medium just as well as you can with animation. Comedy is the one place where animation is just inherently better than any other medium. King of the Hill does not lean into that. It is much more grounded. It is much more in that kind of. It was. I think it was Chuck Jones that called it like illustrated radio when he was talking about Hanna-Barbera cartoons. But it's much more in that kind of grounded vein where it's more so using animation because the guy who created it is a decent illustrator, Mike Judge, and you know, when you're in animation, you don't have to worry about characters aging up and stuff like that. So, yeah, King of the Hill, it's probably... I don't think it's the highest rated. No, there's no way. Yeah, there's one in particular. There's a couple other adult animated cartoons on this list that are higher up, but I think King of the Hill is the realest of them. Number 17 is Samurai Jack. This is a art student's wet dream. I watched it again a couple years ago when the latest season came out, and it's solid. It holds up. There's a couple duds in the episode list, but when you have that many episodes, they're not all going to be winners. And, yeah, it's a really solid adventure series with a lot of really cool action, and then, season 5 was just not as cool. I try not to let bad seasons, negatively impact my feelings of a show on the whole, especially if it's like just a longevity thing like The Simpsons, where, yeah, there is no creative team out there that can keep something going strong for 20 years. It's just not, it's never happened. But Samurai Jack did not have that excuse, and season 5 really just soured it for me. But the other 4 seasons are really good. It's a really solid show, very minimalist, very, in that same tradition of like silent film and older animations, where there's not a lot of dialogue. It's very show don't tell, and it really utilizes the visual medium in its fullest. Number 16 is Shira and the Princesses of Power on Netflix. Fuck you, fight me. I actually did a 2-minute video on this for like Summer Love. Same thing with a lot of these shows, I think. I don't know. That was so long ago that I don't remember what all I talked about. But I remember Shira specifically because when I did that video, I got a comment being like, ew, Shira. Like, it's good. Like, the only thing I could think of that brings it down is that, Katra's, it could have used another season. I don't want to spoil anything, but it could have used another season to help smooth over one or two of the character arcs. But the skeleton was there, and the stuff that it focused on when it focused on it was good stuff. Like, I don't know why the show has gotten a bad rap with certain demographics. It is actually a widely beloved show. Like, it is, the reception around it has been, overwhelmingly positive on the whole. I've just heard a lot of small voices air some complaints that just don't make any sense to me. Number 15 is Justice League / Justice League Unlimited. This is the best adaptation of DC Comics I have ever seen. DC Comics as a whole, anyway. It's not the best DC... It's not even the best DC property on the... Hell, it's barely my top 5 DC properties on this list. Now that I'm looking at it, we'll get there. But this is, it's a show about the wider DC pantheon of superheroes working together to solve various crimes. They adapt a lot of classic Justice League and Superman and Green Lantern storylines throughout its run. This is actually what introduced me to Green Lantern, Flash. This is what introduced me to pretty much everyone except Batman and Superman. Those were the only two that I had been familiar with before then. And yeah, it's just a really solid show overall. I wish it could have maybe gotten more seasons. I feel like there's more villains and stuff that they could have gone to, but 4 seasons in total, 2 for Justice League, 2 for Justice League Unlimited. That's a really solid 4 season run rather. And I'm not going to complain about, having 4 solid seasons instead of 4 solid seasons and 1 bad season. Samurai Jack. Anyway, number 14 is Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Craig McCracken is a genius. I could have said this for Powerpuff Girls. I wanted to kind of save that for Foster's because I didn't want to tip my hand a little too far there. Craig McCracken is a genius, and the entire animation industry should be ashamed of themselves for not giving this man more work. I actually recently found out that he's apparently pitched like 50 different freaking shows to Netflix and Cartoon Network and Disney and stuff, and they keep passing him up because like, oh, it's too weird, or oh, it's not an established IP. Like, fuck you, this is Craig McCracken. Like, this dude just exudes imagination, and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends is his magnum opus. Better than Powerpuff Girls, better than Wander Over Yonder, which is also a really good show. Didn't make the list, but really good show. I want to reiterate, Craig McCracken has not made a single bad show. In fact, I'd have to go back and rewatch it. I don't even know if he's made a bad episode of a show. Like, sure, there's probably duds in Powerpuff Girls and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, but how many of them were ones that he wrote? He was the showrunner and overall creator. He didn't work on every single episode. I'm sure the ones he worked on were all great, because he's just so good at what he does. And Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends is the single most just batshit imaginative kids show I have ever watched. And I watched a lot of them growing up. If it was on Cartoon Network between 1998 and 2012, I watched it almost in its entirety. There's very few shows from that, decade and a half span that I just outright dropped. Speaking of Cartoon Network and its golden age, number 13 is Courage the Cowardly Dog, a show that did not traumatize me as much as you would think, considering my I'm very open about how much of a coward I actually am and how much I just don't handle horror, even though I'm absolutely fascinated by the entire concept of fear and horror as a narrative genre. Courage the Cowardly Dog did mess me up in a couple episodes, but overall I found it more fun than not. It's just a really creative show. A really well done, well produced, well written, all around just solid show. It's one of those shows that it tends to slip my mind a lot when I'm trying to think of great Cartoon Network shows, but then when someone brings it up, I'm like, oh yeah, that's top 5 easy. Top 5 Cartoon Network shows easy. At least as far as the golden age of Cartoon Network. This is the second highest rated Cartoon Network Studios show on my list. The other Cartoon Network shows were all made by other studios. One of them being number 12 on my list, which is Teen Titans by Warner Brothers. Another DC property that ended up being higher than Justice League. Teen Titans takes a very different approach to it by focusing on a younger cast of, at the time, mostly obscure characters. The only character I had heard of before this show was Robin, obviously. And it manages to pull everything off by not acknowledging the Justice League, which is a major point of comparison, or rather contrast, with Young Justice, which is another kind of Justice League Unlimited deal where, Young Justice is about the wider DC world from the perspective of these kids, whereas Teen Titans is about these kids and is therefore just a much more focused show. Also, I think the drama is just top notch, and it's also really funny when it wants to be funny, and it's just got mostly solid episodes. And I also have this show to thank for Low Art. His breakdown of this series in particular is how I discovered his channel, and he has since become one of my favorite content creators on this website. So check his stuff out. Yeah, another Cartoon Network show not made by Cartoon Network Studios is number 11 on my list, which is Star Wars The Clone Wars. I keep wanting to make a video either ranking the episodes or doing like a top 10 episodes or doing like a podcast where we talk about it. We've been trying to think of something and find time to do it for like since the inception of my channel, like 5 years ago. I wouldn't say it's the best Star Wars product, but at its best, it's the best. There's just a lot of duds. There's a lot of bad episodes too. But those bad episodes don't tend to matter so much. But yeah, it's just a really solid 3D anime show by Dave Filoni. It might have had an overall net negative impact on Star Wars lore and stuff, but it was really solid. And unlike Samurai Jack, when it came back for a long overdue final season, that final season actually kind of kicked ass. Well, it kicked ass for the last third of it. The first third of season 7 was okay. The second third was kind of abysmal, and then once Ahsoka got to Mandalore, it was just 10 out of 10 episodes from there on in. And season 6, which was the Netflix season, was top to bottom really solid. A lot of the bad episodes are from the first 2 seasons. Once you get past the first 2 seasons and kind of like get through a lot of the retconning in season 3, it's all just really solid stuff. And it actually explores a lot of different genres within the Star Wars universe, which I think more Star Wars shows should do. Number 10 is Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. Man, how do I describe the show? Hanna-Barbera cartoons in a legal drama, but it's just a batshit comedy instead. Birdman is a lawyer. He works at a law firm, and he helps a lot of Hanna-Barbera cartoons with just these bizarre court cases that they find themselves in, like Johnny Quest's father and they're like his like partner or whatever fighting for custody over the kids, or Secret Squirrel getting sued for flashing women. That's the level of comedy we're going on. And I watched this a lot more than I should have as a kid, and I revisited it after I went to college, and it's actually a lot more tame than I remembered it being. And same could actually be said for my number 9 pick, which is also the top rated adult cartoon on my list, which is Futurama. This is a show that the YouTube algorithm has been very kind to. At a pretty consistent rate, I get recommended clips of Futurama. It's really solid. It's a wacky, zany, absurdist comedy about a guy from the 20th century getting frozen and thawed out in the 30th century, and just living life as a intergalactic delivery boy. Number 8 is a show that was not made for TV. It was actually made for theaters, and that is Max Fleischer's Superman. Max Fleischer's Superman, it was the first adaptation of Superman outside of the comics, I believe. Maybe there was a radio show before then. I don't know. But this is certainly the oldest that I've experienced. And I think this is perfect vintage Superman. Superman is the solution to the otherwise impossible problem, and that is what this whole show is about. You know, it's all about how Superman doesn't get involved unless Superman has to get involved. And it's also just so well animated. This is a theatrical cartoon, and so the standard in animation is actually a lot higher than it really ever has been for TV. Honestly, like, maybe anime in the late 90s, early 2000s had a higher standard, but honestly, I think this is the best looking show on the list, and it's also one of the oldest, starting in 1941. And I just can't think of anything that looks quite this good. Certainly not without the aid of computers, which they did not have in 1941. This was all done by hand. You can maybe make a show that looks this good on like a frame by frame or like motion basis, but any show I've seen that looks this good only looks this good because they had a lot of help from computers. Anyway, number 7 is Edd, Edd, and Eddy, the show that got completely deleted off of the script the first time I recorded this all the way through. How could I have forgotten Edd, Edd, and Eddy? Edd, Edd, and Eddy was my jam. This was, for a very long time, my number one Cartoon Network show. For a very long time, my number one show, period. And it's still my number one Cartoon Network original. And it is a lot like Three Stooges, and it's animated, and it's got this really weird art style that it doesn't look like anything else I've ever seen. The closest I can think of is maybe like Beavis and Butthead, which came out like just a few years earlier. That was Mike Judge cartoon before he did King of the Hill. But yeah, it's about 3 kids living in a neighborhood who all share the same name, who bond together for that reason and pretty much no other reason, because God, they are just so different. And they try to scam people out of their quarters in order to get cartoonishly oversized jawbreakers, and it's just great. I've seen every single episode of this multiple times. It's something I always go back to through YouTube clips and stuff. It's just great. Number 6 is Tom and Jerry, another theatrical cartoon. This one actually did get syndicated to television and then extended with actual seasons and stuff after it made the transition to television. But it started all the way back in 1940. And yeah, it's just classic cat and mouse slapstick cartoon. There's nothing deep here. It's just pure comedy in its purest, most just primal form. I could maybe, like, if I had an individual episode in front of me and I could go frame by frame and be like, see, from a technical aspect, this is why this is, the best slapstick comedy. But there's plenty of other people who are way more hip to animation and way more hip to what it takes to animate stuff like this that have already done video essays about why Tom and Jerry is just top tier shit. Number 5 is Animaniacs. So this was my favorite cartoon as a kid. This was my favorite cartoon until I saw Edd, Edd, and Eddy. And going back, I think I do like Animaniacs just a little bit more. Though only in its original run. The recent reboot they did, I thought was fine. But I ended up liking the Pinky and the Brain stuff in the reboot a lot more than the Animaniacs stuff. I just feel like their shtick kind of wore out on me. See, I feel like I got too old for it, but then when I go back and watch the older Animaniacs clips, it still makes me laugh. And is it just nostalgia? It might just be nostalgia. I don't know. Any of you have that same experience? Let me know in the comments below what you feel about Animaniacs and its recent reboot. But yeah, it's another one that is just slapstick comedy, though this one has a lot more like puns and verbal humor on top of the slapstick. It's not pure slapstick like Tom and Jerry. It's got a lot of pop culture references. If you weren't around in the 90s, you're not going to get a lot of these jokes. So I don't, on that merit, I don't think it holds up that well to younger audiences. And, maybe younger audiences like the reboot a lot more. I don't know. I haven't met a whole lot of people who have actually sat down and watched Animaniacs in its entirety. Number 4 is Gravity Falls. This actually is a contender for my favorite show of all time because it has kind of the best of both worlds, where each individual episode is solid, but the overarching plot is also solid. It just didn't come together for me a lot of times. Like, there's just a lot of episodes that I didn't like as much, and also the top 3 are just god tier greatest things ever made by human hands. So Gravity Falls has some stiff competition to crack my top 3. I don't think any show will ever be able to crack my top 3 animated shows. Like, if I were to combine this with my anime list, none of the anime on my anime list would crack my top 4 either. Like, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood would be my number 5 animated series ever, behind Gravity Falls and my next 3. But yeah, I have a fascination with the, urban legend stuff, and yeah, I like the kind of rounded yet grounded, kind of almost chibi style with this show. Like, it's not quite chibi, but it's kind of verging on that. I really like the art style, I really like the sense of humor, and I like just how it all kind of fits together to become kind of greater than the sum of its parts. Number 3 is Looney Tunes, which I feel like is cheating. Because when I say Looney Tunes, what do I mean? Because Looney Tunes started like 1935 and has gone through like dozens and dozens of iterations. I will say that no other IP has made me laugh as much as Looney Tunes. Just overall. Like, yeah, there's some duds. Yeah, Space Jam, not a fan. Space Jam 2, one of the worst movies ever made. But, man, when you find a good Looney Tunes short, it just lodges itself in your mind and you just never forget it. I had a couple VHS tapes with some of Looney Tunes' greatest hits, and I remember every single one of those episodes by heart. Duck Dodgers, the Rabbit Season, Duck Season, Fire, What's Opera Doc, the bit where Bugs Bunny becomes a conductor and just fucks with that opera singer for, 5 minutes. Anything with Yosemite Sam, anything with Foghorn Leghorn, I found really funny. But yeah, this is another one like Tom and Jerry that started as theatrical cartoons, so the standard of animation is a lot higher. They got syndicated to television in the 50s or 60s, 70s, and it's kind of persevered in various forms from then on. The fairly recent The Looney Tunes show, where Bugs and Daffy are roommates, is also really good, and just shows how great these characters are as concepts for comedy, and it's just funny. And again, I feel like I'm kind of cheating even making Looney Tunes eligible for this list, but even so, it's only number 3. Number 2 and number 1 should be no surprise to anyone. I've talked about them as 2 of the greatest things man has ever created for my entire life, since I watched them. Number 2 is Avatar: The Last Airbender, the best serialized cartoon ever, best animated series ever, as far as animated series that has one cohesive plot. It comes in, it knows what it wants to do, it's very well animated, well acted, just well produced all around. It has mostly solid episodes with like 1 or 2 duds, but even those duds kind of help with the flow of the actual series and help kind of break things up in a meaningful way. So in retrospect, even the bad episodes aren't even all that bad. And even without that, the worst episodes of Avatar are better than the best episodes of plenty of other shows. But yeah, it came in, it lasted for its 3 seasons, and told the story it wanted to tell, and then it totally didn't wear out its welcome with a sequel series. I did not like Korra. It really is just Avatar: The Last Airbender, those 3 seasons that keep this IP alive. Maybe the upcoming like Netflix reboot or whatever remake will be decent. Either way, it's not going to touch Avatar: The Last Airbender as an animated series. And number 1, the greatest episodic series of all time, the greatest animated series of all time, the greatest superhero, probably anything of all time. It's Batman, the animated series. Another show that I've wanted to kind of talk about for a very, very long time. Batman the Animated Series doesn't have a bad episode. It has a couple weaker episodes. It has a couple episodes that I think could have been better or were, kind of just marking time. But yeah, even the worst episodes of Batman the Animated Series are better than the average episode of other shows. It's another one that's just really well made. It's probably the closest to recapturing the Fleischer Superman style. I know that was kind of one of the things they're going for with the Art Deco design. And yeah, it's just solid from top to bottom. It's something that I've revisited several times. I even spent, I think, like $70 on the box set, which I never did. I never buy box sets for TV shows. Not even the ones I really, really like, but I did for Batman. But yeah, it very much deserves its reputation. It deserves all the praise it gets. So, that was my top 20. What are your top 20s? And, what shows do you think could have made the list? Give me some show recommendations in the comments below. I'm Mediocrity4. Thanks for watching.